Good morning. Welcome to Kryton. Today we're going to go over the crystal leak repair system, our in-house method for repairing leak and cracks and defects through concrete. Crystal leak repair system is a three-part system comprising of our own crystal plug, crystal repair grout, and crystal T1 surface applied slurry. We're going to use our little in-house made demonstration piece here to represent the chisel chase that we make when repairing our concrete. Using a demolition hammer with a 1-inch wide flat chisel bit, we're going to chisel a chase 1 inch wide, 1.5 inches deep along the entire length of our defect. We cast these pieces in our lab here to represent the chase and for training purposes. Using a ratio of 4 parts powder to 1 part water, we're going to mix our plug into a fairly wet putty consistency. If you need a reminder of these proportions and the method, we've got handy instructions on the side of our pail. When mixing plug, it's best not to stir it. Instead, hold the pail on an angle like that. Try to mix the plug in as small an area as possible and spread out your water as little as possible. After about 30 seconds in the pail, the plug will start to come together in large pieces. You can then get this out in your hands and work out any dry lumps. You should have enough time to work your plug into a fairly wet Play-Doh type consistency that will now have about 30 seconds or maybe 1 minute before it sets hard, and you can get this in place to stop your leak. And there goes our plug now, set off hard. With our chase prepared in the desired 1 inch wide, 1.5 inch deep profile, I'm now going to place crystal plug in the bottom of our chase, approximately 1/2 inch thick. Plug is only used to stop actively flowing leaks, but if your defect is leaking, you do need to repair the entire length of it, not just the leaking portion. We're going to place our plug into the crack and hold it nice and tight until it sets hard. With the plug installed and our leak stopped, we now need to remove any excess. We've got a bit of plug up the sides of the chase here. We want to be able to remove those so we have a nice clean surface for our grout to bond to. With the excess plug removed from the sides of the chase, flattened off on top, and we want to take the end down at about a 45-degree angle. This way we're not leaving any voids below, and we have a nice surface to pack our next piece of plug against. With our leak completely stopped, we're ready now to proceed with grout. And remember, we want to make sure our leak is completely stopped before proceeding. So, schedule permitting, we recommend you install plug one day and wait overnight, because if that plug is still leaking the following day, you'll be able to see that very clearly against the dry plug. This way you get the repair done on the first try and avoid any rework. With our plug installed and the leak stopped, we're now ready to proceed with our crystal repair grout. First we need to clean and prepare the chase and get it ready to install the grout. We're going to remove any excess plug that came from the cleaning and scraping. Pressure washer is an ideal means of doing this method. We're just going to keep going until our water coming out of it turns nice and clear. Now we're clean and ready to receive grout. However, we need to get the concrete to a saturated surface. If the grout is installed against dry concrete, the concrete will absorb all the water out of it. It won't have enough water to hydrate and harden properly, and it won't develop full strength. In this case, we need to get our concrete to what we consider saturated, surface dry, which is completely saturated surface pores, but no standing or pooled water on the surface that will dilute the products we're going to apply. And when we're using this for a small chase like this, a really convenient trick for that is to insert a sponge into your chase and allow the concrete to soak while you mix up your grout. Now, the grout can go at a few different mix ratios depending on the consistency you're looking for, but as we saw before, we still have a handy reminder graphics on the side of the pail. As you will see, this grout is fiber reinforced, adds strength, and produces shrinkage cracking. These fibers will be seen in the wet working state. They will not be seen in the finished or the dry state. Your repair grout will have a pot life of approximately 20 to 30 minutes, depending on the environment for the day, so you don't need to work nearly as quickly as you did with the plug. At a ratio of 4 parts powder to 1 part water, the grout has a fairly wet, pliable consistency. This would be good for working on horizontal surfaces and floors, but any sort of vertical work, this will slough and fall out of place. At about 4.5 parts powder to 1 part water, you can see we have a little more drier mixture now. We're closer to that Play-Doh consistency we saw with the crystal plug. A little drier now. It has enough body it can stand up under its own weight. But it's still moist that we can trowel a nice, still moist enough that we can trowel a nice smooth finish out of it to match the surface we're repairing. 4.5 to 1 will be ideal for most applications. However, in difficult situations, especially overhead work, we can take this as high as 5 parts powder to 1 part water. So at the 5 to 1 ratio, you can see we have a fairly dry mix, pretty thick and consistent. It does take a little extra work to work this into place. However, as we saw before, with just a little extra effort, we can still trowel a nice smooth finish at our 5 to 1 mix ratio. With our concrete now at a saturated surface dry condition, I can remove the sponge. And I can now use the sponge to remove any excess water out of the chase, bringing this to the dry state that we want to see as part of our saturated surface dry. So with our chase saturated at our SSD condition, we're now ready to install our grout. It's recommended to install the grout in 2 lifts. The first lift, pack tightly into the bottom and make sure you're filling right into the corners and not leaving any voids. The second lift will be packed into the first lift and brought flush with the surface. Now when you're packing your grout, it is recommended to try and avoid this little feather edge you build up on the side. If the grout is installed very thin like that, it'll become brittle and likely crack off later on. Your finished grout installation will look like that, flush with the surface, bonded with the concrete on the sides, and again, we recommend cutting back on a 45 on the end just for simplicity of installing your next piece. With our grout installed, it's now time to install our optional but highly recommended coat of T1 slurry over top of our repair area. T1 can be used in addition to the Crystal leak repair system or as a standalone product for surf-supplied waterproofing. As we saw with our grout, first of all we need to prepare our surface and get it to SSD, saturated surface dry condition. When we say saturated, we mean saturated. That is not saturated. We want to see our concrete nice and soaked, enough water to fill in all these surface pores, and again, a good saturated surface will help hydrate the product and develop full strength. T1 is available in both a gray and a white variety. Today we're working with the gray. The white variety is popular in repair contractors working in underground parkades because they don't need to repaint the walls after their repairs. Using a ratio of 3.5 parts powder to 1 part water, we're going to mix our T1 to a nice slurry consistency. Similar to the grout, we will have a pot life of approximately 20 to 30 minutes, so again, mix as much product as you can in that time. You can mix this with a paddle and a drill if desired. I'm doing it by hand right here. Now when you add your water and start mixing, the T1 comes out in this initial dry, lumpy consistency. Really looks like it needs more water, but it doesn't. We're just going to keep mixing this and shearing it, and very soon we will get to our desired slurry consistency. With our surface at SSD condition, we're now ready to apply our T1. However, first, one consideration is the brush we will use for application. We recommend against a paintbrush. They're very soft, very flexible. You'll find it difficult to actually put any pressure on the product and force it into the surface. The bristles are also very densely packed. They have a tendency to cake up with material. They also have a tendency to drop bristles in the coating. Again, not recommended. A masonry style brush is recommended. They have a little more rigid style bristle, which allows you to force the product right into the surface. They're also a little more open. They tend not to cake up so easily. We have this alternative brush as well. Really the same thing, but the skinny profile is really great for working in corners and reaching around rebar. I'll be using this brush today. With our T1 mixed up, now you can see that if you let it sit for just a couple of minutes, your T1 will skin over, and you might think it's set off on you, but it hasn't. We're just going to stir that up, and we're right back to our spreadable, flowable slurry consistency. So. For application, we recommend either a circular motion or a scrubbing motion. Either way, you ensure you're going to force your product right into the surface, fill in all those surface pores, and get a nice, even, consistent layer. Brush that in. You can smooth out your layer. We're looking for a coating approximately 2 to 3 millimeters thick. Easiest way to check that, you can just drag your finger back through and see the thickness of what's been applied. Again, we will brush that out to a fairly smooth finish. And then as we saw as well, T1 can be used over top of our leak repair. We're going to brush that over the grout several inches each side. And again, we're looking for that smooth, consistent coating as we saw on the other surface. With our T1 application complete, we recommend covering with poly or a tarp to help maintain moisture levels for the first day, keep it from drying out too quickly. After that, the next couple of days, a light mist for wet cure will definitely help it to develop full strength and get full performance out of the product in the long run. After about 10 or 15 minutes, the T1 will now be in a bit of a tacky state. It no longer sticks to your gloves when touched. At this point, if desired, you can provide a surface finish. Whether looking for a broom finish, or a nice smooth trowel, whatever the customer is looking for on that project. This concludes the hands-on portion of the webinar. Thank you for joining us today, and please feel free to contact us if you'd like further information on any of the products you saw here.